Okie dokie. Week 12, here it is. So, a couple things I wanted to go over with you all today. First and foremost, so just want to review what we did last time, which was to, I basically pretended I made a bunch of sprites, and then went ahead and just implemented them into the interface here. There are a couple ways to go about it. Something I sort of failed to mention is a good practice would be just to simply edit the prefab itself, right? Versus going in here and changing all of this. So what happens if you do that, usually you want to just make sure that you make a variant, a prefab variant. And let's say you do go about that, right? So we go in and perhaps we change a bunch of stuff. Maybe, we put an image in here, etc. What we can then do, or maybe we even, change the color of the background. In this case, maybe we add in something like, we can just grab a random little sprite here and pop it in, right? And maybe preserve the aspect ratio. When you select preserve aspect, it's just going to give it the right size, the size that it was on import, so you don't have to worry about resizing it manually, right? It's kind of a nice little trick there. Image type, that's going to be either sliced or simple, more than likely, for what we're doing here. So we're good on that. Just keep it as simple for now. So that's the image component, little review on that. But where I was going with this is when you go and create a UI canvas or add a modification to a UI canvas, best practice is to just make a prefab of it, right? A little variation of it so that you can, be ready for next time if you, happen to need it again, or, something happens to the scene, you can always just grab it. And so what I did was I just pretended I made some edits here in the UI canvas, and therefore I then took that UI canvas prefab that's already existing, dragged it into the appropriate spot, the appropriate folder, which is prefabs within our overall assets project folder, the prefabs folder. So I'll go ahead and select now prefab variant. Upon doing so, I'll get a box that has some stripes on it. This indicates variant. If it doesn't have these stripes on it, it's just kind of a new original prefab, right? Which is, somewhat applicable, but probably best to just do a little variant. Keeps all the same stuff in place, so you don't have to worry about messing around too much, right? And you can reuse it now in another scene, perhaps. So what if I want to change more? And I had mentioned earlier in the video, I'm just going to save my work here. I had mentioned earlier in the video, oh man, I want to change some other stuff. So how do I go about doing that? Well, what you can do is, instead of going into the scene, which is where we are right now, note the environment down here in the corner. Instead of doing that and changing things right in here, which you could do, of course, that's how I showed things to be done last lecture video, but week 11, right? But you can do it another way. So let's say you want to simply change just the prefab. You can really hone in on it. So here we are with a whole list in our hierarchy of all the things we have in the scene. Now I go ahead and click on the UI canvas right here, and notice that the UI canvas variant prefab, notice that I have it just populating on its own. There's no other items or objects, if you will, present. It's just the prefab. So we're editing that alone and making some changes to it. So let's continue with that. So if I wanted to go in here and perhaps change this some more. Best practice if you are going to implement an image is to obviously make sure that you have the correct aspect ratio before you even enter into the space of implementation, or the phase of implementation, I should say. So that way you don't have to adjust too much on import, and it'll actually populate as it looks outside of Unity, right? How do we check for that? So if we are in main, you'll see something called mid-ground filler, and that's just the sort of, I actually put a sprite in there moments ago. This is literally just the sort of backdrop for all the content. So we can look at that and we can say, okay, what's the size? Here we have our little sprite at 100 by 100 pixels. Okay, that's not really the size. That's not the size at all. So in order to gain access or understand what that size is, what we can do is look at this here, which is the the sort of text window, if you will, or we can just select the content, which is the parent to the text. This will give us just that window, which is really what we want. Now, this is being measured in a couple of different ways, so we have to be aware of that. I suppose, yeah, that's a good way to go about it. If we set it to native size, notice that it goes and it gets centered. If I stretch it out, if I go into here, I hold down Alt and just do that, it'll go back to where it was. If I do this, it'll just fit within the box, which is real nice. This just simply centers it. This fills the box. Now, if I wanted to stretch it all the way across, that is indeed possible. I can do that. Kind of stretch it into place here. We can also get rid of preserve aspect, and now we can look at exactly what we have for sizing. Go to content, points, okay. We can then look at, okay, so the height is indeed 1350, so that's nice. And our game view shows this here. I would go ahead and wager that this here is around probably, oops, back here, not 768. We are closer to this in the game view. You have to actually find an image that was actually there before in order to really find it. And it's really what we really want is the aspect ratio, right? So I would go ahead and look at this. From what I see, we have about, just because if this were 2560 and 1440, we go to content, or main, excuse me, we go down to that source image there. And this isn't going to really tell you because this is actually using a different metric system, so it's not actually going to help you out here with that. And this is also positioning. So that's a little different. And the scale's already frozen, so you can't even get really a good look at it there. So what you do is you just say, okay, well, what is this in aspect ratio? Let's say we can't really find a size because there was no image there before, right? And that's definitely the case here. But worth a look. We didn't find anything, but that's fine. So in this case, we have an aspect ratio that we can actually cater to. You just make the image the appropriate aspect ratio, perhaps maybe blow it up to under or about the same as the actual playthrough. So in this case 2560 by 1440, and then you would just adjust accordingly, setting it to a sort of stretch or fill. In this case I'll probably center it there. I'm holding down Alt while I'm doing this, just to kind of center it in place, and then I'll just go ahead and whoops, get our aspect ratio to be preserved. I'll do the same here actually, so I'll actually go ahead and just squish it right in the box so it's not outside of it. So in this case it'd be about 16 by 9, right? And that's just the rule of thumb to follow for this one. And if we were to turn our image here and flip it on its side, it would probably fit just fine in there if it were filled out. So for the buttons, let's say we actually have sort of an image that we can work with. Let's look one up. I'm just going to go into my little Explorer here, find a button, and go from there. So Documents, 119. Oh, those are my sprites. Good to know. And if I have a little something to use for us here for the what we need. Go to environment. This is from a different project. Doesn't look like I have anything that I've created here, but that's all right. So one thing we can do, obviously, you can create your own sprite, which you've done a million times by now. But another thing you can do, just to kind of keep the flow going here, is pick something simple and just test out with it, right? In this case, perhaps I'll use and this isn't really how you use, we'll be using these tiles. It's a different situation and relates to O3C more than anything else. But you can actually use these as well, just as sort of stand-ins, just to kind of get the feel of what we're doing here. Note that it's been stretched out to fit and fill the size of the actual button. Go to Alt, hold down Alt, go into this little top left transform, rect transform. We can center it, we can also fill it here, however you wish. And if you want to, you can make it tiny again to kind of keep the overall look of the sprite. I'll keep it elongated though. I think that's fine for now. Now we did go over font asset creation last time, which was definitely rewarding, I think, or at least I hope. Let's double check, make sure that it's in here. Looks like I have a font, and the one that I put in, I believe, was it this one? Not quite certain here. I don't believe it was that one. And could very well have been something like that, or maybe this one here, right? Please reach out to me if you need a review on that. It's not too difficult. I can always kind of squeeze it into another future tutorial as well. Moving on, just wanted to show you how to change those things a little bit more. And let's say you get into this and all of a sudden it's like a little bit wonky, like this text is in the wrong place, this goes to the wrong place, right? Like what's going on? This is actually fine right now, but there are instances where it might bug out and do that. You can actually, if that does occur for you, you can just go into the game mode and then go back into scene mode and it should correct itself. So just keep that in mind for moving forward. As for animations, the main thing I want to do today is teach you that. So let's get into it. What is this? This is the Animator. It's a finite state machine for animations. This is where you will place all your different types of animations for your player, and there is even a slot for the enemy. Baddie hurt, baddie death, baddie run, baddie idle. You're not required to make all of these for O3B, but I'll get the other one or two in that we need to implement. I'll put those into the O3C rubric so you know to finish that up. I wanted to separate them out a little bit. And you'll notice that a lot of these are just attached to each enemy, right? If you go to the player, obviously the player has its own set of animations being animated and a little own set of FSM, finite state machine, going on. So if we proceed to the character animations folder in assets, remember assets hold all your project goodies. And it's very important, especially if working on teams, that you keep that organized. Audio, character, documentation, any editor scripts, etc., environment, mod assets, prefabs, which is what we were playing around with in the beginning there. Scenes, definitely save as a different scene name. Make sure that is proper. You may even want to go ahead and completely delete this sample scene so that it doesn't sort of destroy what you're working on here in scene 1, just because there's some editor tutorial aspect to it that can be a little bit buggy sometimes. Keep it there for now, and I will update you on it just in case. If there are bugs, that's not good, and we'll get rid of it. But if I don't say anything otherwise, then no worries. Scripts, TextMesh Pro. This is a separate package that just holds a lot of documentation, resources, and sprites for text, font, all of that. Tutorials, obviously. This is just pointing to the tutorial aspect of things. And your tiles, and we'll get to the tile map editing process next week. Back to the character. Player. Remember, this is a hierarchy. This is your inspector. This is where you make all the immediate edits for an object in your scene. Organize your panels as you wish. So right here, I'm actually going to simply replace what I have in player idle and replace what I have in player run or walk, depending on what you got going on, right? As such, let's get into it. Player idle. Let's start with that. What do we have to do? So for the player idle, first and foremost, I want to make sure I have the sprites I need for this, and that'll be extremely useful. So we'll actually open up my little Explorer. We'll go back to where I actually was earlier when I was looking for something else, for that sprite button, into my little lecture videos folder, and then I will go into my morning class here. Now I have one that's a bounce, so I am going to actually put that in, and I believe I have an idle, but I have to export. I'm going to actually, let me just see this. Okay, there's my idle. Okay, that's my idle there. I just don't have a sprite sheet for that yet, so I'm going to make that while I'm with you here. So and I'll open that up again just so you can see it while I'm, cool. So we're going to take that GIF, and I'm going to go into the Piskel app, go to create sprites. So I'll put this over here a bit, just so you can see what's going on. So we are on the interwebs, and we have this little GIF that's shaking back and forth. That is our idle. Just going to drag it right in. I'm not even going to worry about making that precise little route where you click on a button to import, right? But it is nice practice to do that. We'll import that as a sprite sheet. Note the selection. Press OK for that. And it'll just it'll go accordingly. We'll keep it at 24 FPS. Why not? That's a nice way to do it. And we don't have to export it to a different size. We can change that in Unity. I'm going to go ahead and export though now. It's simple as that, right? Crazy. I'm going to limit this to 2 rows. Looks like it wants me to do this though, so 5 and 2. That's good. This is what I have for that walk cycle, or run cycle rather. I just did a simple ball, a little back and forth, just so I can show you how to implement what you have animated, and you don't feel, we can just kind of cut to the chase. I don't have to bore you with more animation creation, right? I may bring up some more character stuff later on, but for now, I think the most important part is implementing these animations so that you know what you're doing. There are plenty of tutorials that I've made and provided, as well as supplemental material for your learning. Did I download it? So we'll go and open up a new tab for our little explorer here. Go to downloads. Downloads, nothing. Okay. Guess I didn't do it. So there it is. Very good. All right, we have it here. And I'm just going to go, whoops, where did my stuff go? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and drag that right into place so that I have that. And I will rename that because I'm wondering if this is this. There's the bounce walk. Okay. There's my idle. Looks like I need that bounce walk. I think I just made an idle, an additional idle. So I'll go ahead and do that as well. It takes 2 seconds. So I'll go back into Piskel. Going to drag the bounce walk over, just like this, and that is a GIF, remember. So there you are. Doesn't like that. So I will reload. Not going to worry about saving here. I will import. I'm just going to do a little drag and drop again. There you go. Import a sprite sheet. Import that. Takes a couple seconds here. Press OK. Bring that up to 24 so it's up to speed. And then I'll be exporting at 4 rows. Can I do 3? Let's do that. Download. There we are. There's my bounce walk sprite. Bounce walk. Okay. very good. I'll go ahead and minimize that. Not necessary at the moment, so we're good. And I will bring us back to Unity. Now we have to get these into our scene. So easy way to do that, just drag them right in. Being that we're in the character folder and we're in the sprites folder therein, pretty straightforward. Just drag that stuff right on down. Additional idle as well. Now the beautiful part about this, since we're using a sort of template, is that we have the ability to automatically go right into Sprite 2D UI mode. We don't have to change that texture type, which is fantastic. We do have to change the sprite mode, however, and right now I'm getting into import settings, so definitely important to kind of follow along, or at least take some notes. Sprite mode, make it multiple. Now our creations are going to populate pretty big because of the resolution they're set at. So as a consequence, we have to do a couple things. I'm actually going to bring the pixels per unit number up to 512. I'll keep that at tight for now. We'll see how it looks. If you're using pixels as an aesthetic, then definitely point no filter. For myself, I'm okay with bilinear, but I'll do point no filter anyhow, just so that you know, you're aware of what's going, or we're all on the same page if you are using pixel stuff. But bilinear is usually fine. So we'll go ahead and just double check all of these goodies here. Apply. Looks like this is a little big. I definitely don't need it to be that big. Actually, no, I do, because of the, yeah, so this is perfectly acceptable. Okay. So we'll keep that as such. Now, I used format ARGB 16-bit because I don't need a lot of color. There's only one color on this asset, so I really don't have to get into changing that around and the like, or keeping 32-bit, right? I can limit it to 16 bits without any issues of color, color difference, etc. It's very basic. If there is a difference, it's extremely subtle. But this helps with optimization, so I'll keep it as is. One thing I want you to take note of is the fact that, you know, it looks like these could technically kind of be placed into cells, so to speak, right? Well, what do you know? We have the ability to do that, and it is right here. One thing that I'm going to have you pay attention to when messing around with a multiple sprite sort of creation for animation, a sprite animation if you will, is that you need the sprite editor first and foremost. So that's a separate panel. Usually it will populate if you hit sprite editor. However, if it does not, it should be in window. And if it's not in window, that means you need to download a package of sorts. So let me just do a slight review of the package situation. What do I mean by that? Go into window, go to package manager, and this little box is going to pop up here where you can now alter and insert several different packages that would be helpful or useful for your creative process, right? You definitely need 2D Sprite. That should already be in there. This is an optional one, the PSD importer. Don't worry about that one. 2D animation is a must. That may or may not be implemented. Please implement that. 2D Sprite Shape is another one that could be good. The Tile Map Editor, very, very necessary for what we're doing. So you essentially go down the line. It's just the Tile Map Editor. Make sure you have 2D Sprite. Sprite Shape isn't crazy important. PSD importer, not crazy important for what we're doing. right? Depends what you're doing. Pixel Perfect can be good and can help with the way things look. 2D animation, definitely a must. Just pause and take note of what I have here, right? That's pretty much all you have to do. You'll see a button when you select one of these that says install. Just install it, follow prompts, and you're good. And then you can proceed back to your sprite. So after you take those notes, go back to your sprite, and we'll proceed with the tutorial here at this point now. Sprite editor. This is after you have done all your import settings. Also take note of that, right? And it depends on the image too, so be careful with this. Sometimes you may want it to be 4096, especially if it's a larger sprite sheet atlas or what have you. If you do have questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer and help you along with identifying what the right size would be. More than likely you'll be fine with, with something like this, but just want to make you aware of that. So why do we use, why is this sprite mode so important? The sprite mode is important because you have to split these up into cells. And those cells are read from left to right, and you are almost like giving it a sequence of sorts, like an animation sequence, right? A sequence of images, frames that are slightly different, creating movement. Go into the slice, drop down. Instead of automatic, go to grid by cell size, cell count, Grid by cell count, select that. And if you recall, in Piskel we had placed something like, I believe it was 2 rows and 5 columns, which is exactly what this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. All of these settings are good to go. Centering the pivot, always nice. I don't have any empty recs, not going to worry about it. Slice it. Perfect. That's it. Press apply, we're good to go. Don't worry about that pop-up, you can exit now. So now that we have that in place, I want to go back to animations. And there is another window for animating. We are going to be editing the player idle. As such, we want to find that animation, which is right here. We're going to open that up, just do a little double click, and save your work before we go into animating. So we'll just click save. Always good to save before animation or before a build. Definitely good to save your work before putting a project in, but more importantly, actually exporting all of the work out as a sort of package. And I can go over that at a later time when we get closer to the finishing. So what we have here, and you can see the little boogers in there, each frame, a little up and down motion from the little guy. Right, nice, good. I don't want those anymore though. I'm gonna get them out of there. I'm just gonna straight up delete them. And now what I'll do is take my sprite that I've created. I'll move this window out of the way. All the import settings are good, and I have literally, sliced it up so that it could act just like a sort of image sequence, right? So go ahead and use this little arrow here and pop it right out. Select Shift, so click Shift and select again to the last frame. So starting from the first to the last, drag all of that in. If it does not actually go in here, Usually there's a reason for that, and we'll get into it. So what do we have to do? Main thing is we want to make sure that we are actually on the player. So this is actually a common mistake. I did it on purpose here so you would see. So what I had done is I actually went into, not the player, but I went into the animation itself. And that animation is locked up and very much dedicated to this player, right? And yeah, it saved the deleting of the sprites, but it did not save the the addition I wanted to make, nor did it even allow me to do so. So note that the difference here. So this is 1 by 1 when I do this. There's absolutely nothing drops down when I click here. That means it's just that animation in itself, but it's very much tied to the player, right? If I click on player, notice that things lit up a little bit more. And now I have this drop down of all the different animations combined. So this is where we really want to edit. As such, take your sprites for that idle, and I'll actually maneuver this a little bit so that I don't get, there we go. Do the same process, so we'll select that first frame and shift, select last. Now when we drag it in, you'll get that little plus box with the cursor and happy pappy. There's your idle character, right? Doesn't take too long. Doesn't take too long to implement these. Now after each one, I definitely suggest that you test it out because it could be moving too fast or too slow, right? So let's press play and let's just see what happens here. May have to move this window. And I have to make sure that my UI canvas is off because it doesn't need to be on when the game starts. Another thing to note, the player is missing its sprite. Let's just replace it with this idle because we want it to start with that anyways, right? So we'll go ahead and replace that. We're good, and we will press play. And there's the ball just kind of moving back and forth, but it's also switching back to the its previous state of animations, animated sprites, but it works. That's good. And again, if you want to change the size, the sizing, you can go back into that import and actually perhaps do 256. Press apply. And there you are. Now you have a slightly larger ball to that goes into idle, right? So if we press play again, yeah, now it's kind of fitting a little bit better with everything. It's just kind of idling. Good. And now you would just do the same for this here. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we will go ahead and kind of witness how it all works, right? So I've gone ahead and selected that. I'm now going over to this side here. I'm going to select point no filter so it matches. I'll keep that 2048 ARGB 16-bit like I wanted. I'm going to go to multiple and 256 for the unit. Significance of those numbers, just even numbers, really. That's something that you should just kind of shoot for the most part. But yeah, that's going to help with the sizing and all that. Go into the sprite editor. We'll hit apply, of course. This one's a little different. We have 3 columns and many more rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 frames, images in sequence. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows and 3 columns. I like to double count. Grid by cell count. 3 columns and 6 rows. Not going to keep those empty recs. I do not want them. This is good. Perfect. Everything's centered, very nice. And you can indeed edit these, but do not do it unless you absolutely have to. It can be a pain to get everything to kind of line up right. Just an FYI. Just kind of keep it how it is. As long as you have everything pre-produced properly, you shouldn't have an issue. Good with that, very nice. All right. And there's our line of bouncing, walking ball character. So I'm going to go back to the player, selecting that player object, going into Animator to make sure I'm actually populating that. And I will open up that animation window from here now, instead of double clicking on the single animation. So Animator, animation. Animation is the innards of the animator, if you want to look at it like that. They do very different things but work together. So the animator is connecting animations. Animation is like, well, it's the animation. What is being animated will come from animation. The animator points to what has to come before or after or during, etc. Current, past, present. You can add parameters. You can add events, which is fantastic in regards to maybe loading a screen after an animation, something we're definitely going to get into with our videos and the like. Animation, though, that's what we want. So instead of player idle this time, and if we actually drop down, we can see our ball there. We can now go to run, player run. And yeah, I'm going to delete all those. Boop. All done. And I will go ahead and select the sprites from said sprite sheet of the bouncing walk ball. Bring it in. This should play just the way I want it. I'm not worried about it. We'll go ahead and exit out of that, and we'll go to the scene, press play. There we go. So there's my idle, and there's my ball bouncing. A little bit quick, but it works, right? That's pretty funny. You can always adjust things like that as well. There are many avenues to go down in that regard. So let's say it is a little bit too fast for you, or perhaps you want it to. I noticed that the ball is basically floating, right? So maybe you want it to be closer to the. You want things to be closer to the bottom, or what have you. You can adjust the pivots accordingly. So if I go to scene, let's see. I can actually go into here, go to sprite editor. I can have the pivot be like center, bottom center, right? And we can just kind of play with that. You'd need to edit each one though. Notice this, and you can do this where you, kind of do it while you are. Yeah, so you could do like bottom center, and just bottom. Yeah. Grid by cell count, and 3, and 6. There we are. Now everything should be, there's a pivot right at the bottom for each one. Okay, hit apply. Now let's just see what happens. This could be interesting. So we'll go ahead and press play. Game view. And it's actually higher, right? Perhaps we should have picked the top portion. The chances are you'll just have to use the center pivot. You can always look at what they have going on here. So if we open up this guy, go to sprite editor and check out, they have it centered. They have the character centered, and it's just a matter of sizing it appropriately. So that's what we'll do, right? Stick with that center pivot and just make sure all your animations are centered therein to some extent. Very good. If you want to slow it down, let's do that. So if we're trying to slow this down a bit, and actually I am going to just kind of make those 100 count because it's still too small for me in my opinion. So apply that, make this 100 as well, apply that one, that's for the idle. And now we'll implement the speed control. So if we go to player, animator, and we go to the idle, you can do one of two things. You have this kind of speed parameter here that you can adjust. Perhaps it's, 0.75 or something like that, right? That's one way to do it. You don't have to do it that way. Another way to do it is to actually truly match what you had imported as, which would be the 24 FPS. If you recall, I bumped it up during the process of the Piskel sprite sheet creation. So you'd go into animations, go to player idle, and notice that, oh wait, there's nothing here, right? Well, check this out, go to debug. There are definitely things going on. And we can, debug is a great place to go if for some reason it says something like, oh, it's checked as legacy, you need to change that. Let's say you make your own animation. This happens sometimes. The update's pretty much cleared all those bugs out, but just in case, if it does say that, it just means go into debug instead of normal mode, and that was these little dots up here, and uncheck legacy, and then it'll work with your animator. That's all that means. As for the sample rate, well, we can simply bump it up to 24, just kind of match what we had, right? Or maybe even go up to 30. Likewise with player run. So, player idle, player run. Clicking the wrong thing here. Player run, there we are. And this one was actually at 48, so interesting. Maybe kind of makes sense. I actually kind of makes sense that happened. So if it's 30, let's just see how it runs at 30. And for the idle, I would say you might as well make that 30, right? So just see what happens. So 30 and 30, good to keep your sample rates fairly consistent. Yeah, and obviously that's like insane wildness there. We're going to bump that player run up to 60. There we are. And we'll set all those pivots back to the position of center. So we'll go into the sprite editor for the sprite bounce walk, player run. Go into slice, go into by cell count, and we'll do 3 and 6. And then we're going to do center. Make sure that's centered. Slice it up. Good. Centered now. Press apply. Yep, that's a lot better. And now it's just a matter of just moving it down manually in the scene. So I can actually go select the player, press F on the keyboard. Notice I'm not seeing anything, right? Oh, there it is, right? Get out of play mode so you can actually make changes. Go to the scene view, player, press W for player, W. Bring that player down. Doesn't seem like I have to go down that much, to be quite honest. So I'm just gonna see what's going on here. Press play. We'll just fidangle with this a little bit. Oops. Oh, I guess I do have to go down that far. That's all right. So if that's the case, we'll just bring it all the way down, and we'll press play again. See where we literally landed here. And I have a weird pink situation going on here. If you have not noticed, that's just due to something I implemented in the past. Okay, so it has to go down a little bit further. We'll actually bring it down a little further. Boop. Press play. See how it's looking. It seems to be lower, but not that much lower. It's something that can be adjusted more and more. Let's see what happens if I do that. See if it actually does move. Chances are it's... Yeah, there we go. Yep, so I just have to adjust the pivot for each of these. May even be a situation where I'm still in debug mode here, so I'll just go back to normal mode. I can see things properly. And I'll be able to just bring this back to 0 since it's not doing anything for me. And this is where the sizing can really matter, right, before you import things. So let's just take a look at this. So just for your own reference, moving forward per each little slice here, you just want to make sure that you're keeping a sort of some kind of consistency with where the actual player is situated here along the pixels. If you notice where these are, they're a little bit higher, right? So what you can do is, well, you can increase the pixels per unit, of course, or rather decrease even more. Not necessarily the best way to go with that. If I were to simply select that and sort of figure out, obviously you can adjust the cells and all that. That's something you can do. It's just a matter of really finding out what needs to be done ultimately. So if this needs to be lower, just like this character is, about right there, then you would adjust accordingly. So you could actually adjust positions here, right? That's the position of the square, but yeah, this is something you can kind of play around with to get right. Not always an exact science, but for the most part it usually ends up all right. If you do want some more insight into that, please reach out to me. There are easy ways to get around things and optimize your workflow. More advanced topics to come. If you want to start implementing the cycles that you've created, by all means, go for it. You have the tools now. If you do have some questions, I am here to answer, and enjoy.